Now, with the recent LGBT victories here in the United States, there's still a lot of work to do for equality when it comes to sexual orientation around the world, that is. And a recent study out of the Pew Research Center shows how countries across the globe fare when it comes to the acceptance of the LGBT community. So how are attitudes changing, and who still has the most work to do? Joining me to discuss is Jaevion Nelson, a Programme and Advocacy Manager for JFLAG in Kingston, Jamaica. Kyle Goldfinch, a filmmaker and choreographer in Sydney, Australia. Marsha Izumi, an author and PFLAG National Board member in Arcadia, California. And Olga Kazan, the global editor for TheAtlantic.com in Washington, D.C. So hello, everyone. Thanks for joining me today.
Thank you so much.
Lana.
Thank you.
I think that we have a lot to cover here, and there's so many different angles that we can pursue, because there culturally are a lot of differences around the world politically. You look at religion and the role that it plays. But first, why don't we just kind of start with some of you that are in places where I feel like we don't often get to hear about what the situation is like on the ground for the LGBT community. So, Jaevion, I'd love to go to you first and, just hear what it's like in Jamaica. Jaevion, excuse me.
Hi, that's all right. Thank you. I think, in Jamaica, it's pretty much, it's not as everyone would like to think that Jamaica is this place where there are machete-wielding mobs running around looking for a gay man or a gay woman to lynch as soon as they're spotted. It's a very diverse and multicultural space. There are lots of different challenges that LGBT people face, of course, but there are a number of LGBT people who, even as scared as they might be, are living their lives, are, living and coming out. Allies are coming out as well. And the We Are Jamaicans campaign that we launched on January 17th this year, for example, shows just how brave and courageous a number of LGBT persons are, as well as our allies, to ensure that we help to build the Jamaica that we want to see, to ensure that there are people who understand that it is okay to be Jamaican and to be gay, and that there are spaces where, as a gay person, you can join.
And tell me a little bit more about JFLAG and your organization, too.
JFLAG is the foremost organization in Jamaica that is working on issues related to the rights of lesbian, gay, bisexual, and transgender people. We focus primarily on ensuring that the services of the state and non-state actors are provided in a very sensitive manner and considers the needs of LGBT people. And we also do a little bit of social services and crisis intervention for persons who might have had their rights infringed or might have been exposed to threats because of their sexual orientation or real or perceived sexual orientation.
All right, Kyle, let's go to you. And by the way, nice to see you again, Kyle. Recently you were on our news quiz here at HuffPost Live. But, tell me a little bit about Australia. And, and before we do that, too, I want to pull up actually something from the Pew Research Center, where they had this global survey that they did looking at where, which areas of the world, or in which areas of the world there was greater acceptance for homosexuality. And a lot of the time there was greater acceptance in more secular regions of the world, in more affluent countries, especially if you look at North America and Europe. And obviously the situation changes when you go down to especially you could say the Middle East and Africa. But where does Australia stand? Here, according to this survey, 79% of people said that society should accept homosexuality, compared to only 18% that said no.
Well, I think in Australia it is inevitable that it's going to happen in the next 5 or 10 years. I just think that we are such a community of people that are so supportive. And I think back in 2010, 2011, there were a lot of I think the last survey was that Christians in Australia believe 67, I think it was, % of people actually believed that gay marriage was okay. But I think you still have a couple of fringe groups that say the most outrageous things, like especially the Australian Christian lobby, who believes that if you legalize gay marriage in Australia, then you're going to have a second stolen generation. Now, for people who don't know what the stolen generation is, it's where Aboriginals back in the 50s and 60s got taken away as assimilated in society. So I think there's just some crazy things, but I feel like that, especially in New South Wales where I live, there is actually going to be a lot more change, especially with some recent news that's come out of New South Wales and Sydney.
And so, and I think that, I mean, maybe for us Americans, I think that, do you think that Australia is a country and a society which we can compare pretty closely to our own? I mean, I think that that's probably fair if you want to talk about it culturally, if you want to talk about it from an economic perspective too, right? If we're talking affluence and religion, that probably, politically, do you think that Australia is one of the closest to what we see going on here in the U.S.?
Oh, definitely, of course. I've got this article here that I downloaded, which looks at that New South Wales, where I actually live, is the first state, the first state in in Australia that's actually going to openly maybe legalise gay marriage. If I read you a bit of this, it says that New South Wales Gay and Lesbian Lobby today welcomed the report of a Legislative Council and Issues Committee on Same-Sex Law, which means that they did a 10,000 submission inquiry where they actually told people. Is there something wrong, Elena?
Oh, no. I'm sorry. It was not about anything that you were saying. I apologize. We were just having a technical issue here.
I'm sorry. Yeah, we might have had an issue there. I hope it's not sort of doing anything wrong. But yeah, so sorry. I just lost my train of thought.
That's okay. That's okay. I did not mean to. I did not mean to ruin your train of thought there. My unprofessional moment there. Olga, let's go to you for a moment, because one thing that I think that has definitely been in the news recently, especially with U.S. and Russian relations, being front and center in the news world, not only because of the Edward Snowden affair and Barack Obama's decision to not attend a bilateral meeting between he and President Vladimir Putin in Moscow over what's going on. There's a lot of attention being paid to, of course, this law in Russia that bans homosexual propaganda. And it's something that I think that there's actually a lot of misunderstanding about what exactly this law does. But you wrote about this in The Atlantic too, saying, why is Russia so homophobic? And I'm very curious to hear your thoughts. This is something, I can chime in on a little bit, being Russian myself and having, a lot of family and friends there. But what's your perspective as to why this is happening right now?
Sure. Well, what's interesting about Russia is that it's one of the few not very religiously devout, or at least not historically very religiously devout countries that tends to have a lot of homophobia. There's a couple of theories going on here. First of all, very few Russians actually think that homosexuality should be accepted. I think it's something like 16% of them do. I think that a lot of it has to do with the fact that it's sort of ingrained in the culture. A lot of it is sort of dated back to Soviet times when it was against the law to be gay, and it sort of just persisted even throughout all of its kind of transitions of governments and things. And it kind of stems from this culture of machismo that is very much present. And then I think just more recently, as a lot of the policymakers there have been looking to kind of set Russia as a counterweight to Western values and European values. They've been looking to kind of circle their wagons in a way and exclude segments of the population that they find or that they think that a lot of people there might find objectionable, which in this case includes homosexuals. And so it's kind of half political, I would say, and half cultural. Even though there's not really a clear kind of religious reason for it. And that's just sort of my take and the take of other experts that I've talked to.
And that's really interesting, too, that you bring in, religion here, because I think that we have another graph that we can show you from the Pew Research Center, which, takes a look at, there we go. So basically, it takes a look at the religiosity scale is on the bottom there. And so, the more religious that a country is, generally and typically, the less accepting that country is. And so why do you think that, it's so interesting? Why is Russia perhaps an anomaly in that sense? Not only Russia, China as well, because we do definitely see this, in Africa and the Middle East in particular, where religion plays a very strong role in society. But why not in Russia?
Sure. Well, I think part of it is sort of a historical phenomenon, just sort of stemming from traditions and culture that has existed there for a long time. But I also think that actually Russia has sort of become a little bit more religious over time. Religion was banned in the Soviet Union, but it's since become kind of more of a political force, actually. Patriarch Kirill, which is the Russian Orthodox patriarch, has sort of campaigned for Putin and like stumped for him. He has sort of conflated protesters and dissidents with Satan. So I think all of this sort of eventually gets mashed together, where if you have sort of these liberal Western values, you become conflated with unbelievers, dissidents, other people who both the church and the Putin administration are opposed to. And I think that, it's a little bit of fear-mongering as well. I mean, it's the same reason minorities have always been marginalized. A lot of those same reasons are at play here. It's kind of a defensive crouch, I would say, on the part of the Kremlin and a lot of these regional administrations that have been passing these laws.
Yeah, I think those are all really good points. I mean, clearly it's a very complicated situation there, but if anything, I think it bothers me when people try to oversimplify. We played earlier today too a clip between Lawrence O'Donnell and Julia Yaffe from the New Republic, where they were arguing as to this entire Edward Snowden ordeal and whether or not Putin has full control, 100% full control of what was going on the second that Snowden touched down on Russian land. And it's yes, there are a lot of political actions involved here too, but there is a cultural dynamic that exists in Russia that I think that we miss that nuance, and there is a lack of that perception and that depth very often when these are things that are reported on in the Western press, if you ask me. Marsha, let's go to you. I do not mean to leave you out here, and you have numerous perspectives that you can really offer us too, not only to talk about what the situation is like within some of the Asian countries in the world in particular, and Japan, but you live in the United States, and you and I have spoken before. It's nice to see you, by the way, again here on HuffPost Live. You. And so, but for those that did not see your first appearance, tell us a little bit about your son, about the experience that you've been through, and and the way that you think that the Pan-Asian community in the United States is its own kind of microcosm.
Mm-hmm. Well, first of all, my son is transgendered. He came out as lesbian when he was 15, and then at the age of 20, he transitioned to be male. And so, as a family, we had a very difficult time. I think one thing that about the Asian community is they really go into a lot of shame. And so when they go into shame, they go into the closet. They want to avoid. A lot of Asian families don't really believe that being LGBT is a choice. They think they've been influenced by the Western world. And so for me, the reason I got involved was because there weren't that many Asian faces and voices. And so people just didn't think that this was a choice. They thought, well, there's no other Japanese families or Chinese families, so it must be that they came to the United States and they got the LGBT disease, is kind of how a lot of Asian families saw it. So, but I think one of the things is when we go into shame, then we hide and we don't get resources. And I think the thing that pulled me out of it was to get information, because Olga talked about the fear. Well, yeah, I went into fear, but it was through information and awareness and support through groups like JFLAG that I was able to see that my son, it wasn't a choice, and then I was able to go through my own transition as a mother. So, I think.
I was just going to say that it's so important to hear your part of this too, because you're talking about your own personal transition, right? As a mother, the way that this affects your family, your relationship, just starting with a smaller knit community. And so I'm curious to hear how all of you feel too, because it does become a very politicized issue. You see this with people bringing up a possible boycott of the Olympic Games in Sochi in 2014. We've definitely seen this come up with Uganda, for example, where they had some very, very strict legislation. I don't know if we've actually heard that much about, let's say, Qatar, which is going to be hosting the World Cup which also has very discriminatory laws in that sense and is not accepting of a homosexual or LGBT lifestyle. And so I want to hear from all of you, and maybe Jaevion, we can start with you. But do you think that it's any other country's role to point out, what other countries are doing wrong in this sense? I mean, it's normal, right? We see countries talk about what they see as human rights violations in other places all the time. But do you think that it's the right thing to do? Or should they let each culture deal with it in their own way?
Certainly. I think it's, we live in a very global sort of community now, and, every day physical borders are reducing more and more. I think we all have a responsibility to ensure that our brothers and sisters in wherever they are living a life that they are able to, live their full potential as human beings and to be accorded with the respect and dignity that they deserve. So certainly I think we all have a right to have some sort of responsibility, rather, to help people in different countries. So for example, my own country, and I think it's very important that our allies in different countries support our work. However, the challenge has always been to ensure that whatever is done to suit cultural norms and mores, and ensure that these things, people are respected, and that if partners in international countries, whether from international NGOs or bilateral or multilateral partners, they should take the guidance and follow the lead of local NGOs, local actors who are on the ground, actors who understand more specifically what is happening and what are the best needs, and provide technical assistance, etc. But I do think they have an important role to play just the same. For example, when people seek asylum in other countries, it's the taxpayers in that country who then have to bear the burden of the injustice that is being meted out to others in different countries. So, I do think there is a responsibility, even in other social issues where LGBT people, for example, in Jamaica are being turned away from HIV services or schools, etc. It does have a burden on foreign aid and what, bilateral and multilateral partners or philanthropists have to provide for countries.
Kyle, what do you think?
I absolutely, totally agree with that. I absolutely echo, sorry, I can't say your name, I'm sorry, your point.
Jaevion.
And I just want to bring up, sorry, Jaevion, sorry. I just want to bring up this idea of homophobia and this fact that we need to be doing more, and we need to educate ourselves as a community, as a world community, into this idea of homophobia and why we need to start respecting and being tolerant of people. And I have to say, from my own religious standpoint, I'm a Christian, so I believe in the Christian foundations of being tolerant, being accepting, being truthful, being trust to this whole community. And whether or not you're in the whether or not you're in the lesbian, the gay, the bisexual, the transgender, the intersex, the queer, we need to all be respectful. We need to all be educating on this whole world community. I don't know what the other panelists think, but that's what I think. I think we just need to be respectful, and we just need to be tolerant of each other. And that's something that we should be doing.
And I agree. I mean, I think even within the LGBT community, like my son has experienced discrimination because oh my gosh, I'm going to cry. Because, people thought that he was transitioning just to have an easier life and not have to go through life being a lesbian. And so he was like abandoning, that segment. And my son is just trying to be himself. So, I mean, even within the community, I think there's things that we can do to bring greater acceptance. And culturally, I just think that there's so much that we can do. Every culture is so different. Even within the API community, the cultures are different. And just to listen, like Jaevion was saying, and listen to the local people and what they need and try to understand it, that's the way that we're going to bring more awareness and make people less afraid to come out and support their children.
Well, Olga, let me go to you too. And I know that I keep going back to the politics of these things, but unfortunately it does come down to that often. And, let's just say the way that we see this play out on a global stage is if groups do choose to take a stand over something that is an international event like the Olympics, like the World Cup. Do you think that that's a good strategy, a good way of going about it to highlight the issue, is trying to boycott, or at least, threaten a boycott of an event like this? I mean, because at the same time, you're never going to convince, the United States to stop selling weapons to Saudi Arabia. That's not exactly something that you see the entire world speaking out about and picketing over. And maybe that's because that happens a little more in the shadows. So is this going after a big global event like the Olympics something that is a better strategy and might be more effective?
I mean, good is sort of, it's hard for me to say what a good strategy would be. I mean, as far as raising awareness, sure. I mean, having people sign petitions, and things like that, to blog about this issue and talk about it is certainly helpful to raise awareness about this and to hopefully bring about some sort of change. That said, I don't know how effective Olympic boycotts have been historically. I don't think any government has ever totally reversed their position because of an Olympic boycott by any country, or a handful of countries, unless maybe if every single country in the world didn't go to Sochi, then maybe something would change. But also, I mean, these laws were implemented on a regional level before they were implemented on a national level in Russia. So I think the support for them is there at the grassroots. It's not something that's coming from the top down, like from the Kremlin or something. So I just don't know how the politics of that would play out. And then as far as there's also a boycott on the Stoli vodka. But the thing about that, and there was a really good article today in the Atlantic Wire, actually our sister site, and talking about how that actually has been successful if you think about it in terms of Google searches and awareness, and I mean, people paying attention to Russia and the human rights issues there. But it hasn't actually been successful in hurting the bottom line of Stoli vodka, which actually you don't want to hurt the bottom line of Stoli vodka, because it actually is a very pro-LGBT company, and it's also not, the stuff that's exported is produced in Latvia, not in Russia. So even though this is sort of like a sham boycott and probably won't have any impact on their bottom line, it's still helping to raise awareness about these issues, and that could be kind of a beneficial side effect of all of these kind of petitions for the Olympics and things like that. It's just bringing more attention to this issue, hopefully pressuring Russia to do something. But as far as predicting how effective it'll be, I have no idea.
Yeah, well,
I just jump in there?
Yeah, go ahead. I was just going to say that the Stoli point is a good one of showing how sometimes something that is good-natured can have either negative results or just be a little misguided. But go ahead, Kyle.
I just wanted to say on that point, you actually bring up a great point about the vodka thing, because I was actually reading in one of the Sydney papers that some leading gay bars in Oxford Street, which is a famous sort of district for the gay and lesbian community of Sydney, has actually sort of boycotted and started not selling that sort of vodka in actual sort of protest of Russia's homophobic laws. And I just wanted to bring it back to the whole communication of what Marsha said and what Jason said about being a community and actually working with social media. And we wouldn't be having this conversation 10 years ago, because not really a lot of us would know about this sort of stuff, and we wouldn't be having this conversation like we would.
Yeah, well, Marsha, what do you think about that? Rather than having to necessarily go to a smaller group, to try to meet other parents that might be going through the same thing, that you have, or try to find other people within the Pan-Asian community. Do you think that more national, more international awareness campaigns, even if, as Olga pointed out here, with the Stoli thing, it can be a little bit misguided. Do you find that helpful?
Well, I guess I do. Actually, I'm going to be flying to China in September, and because there's a lot of Chinese parents and LGBT individuals, that, of course, the government isn't supporting them, but they need support because their children are suffering. In China, many of the kids will just go ahead and marry to please the parents, and then down the road they have children, and then they can't stay there. So then they bring all the shame to their family. And so a lot of the young people in China are trying to kind of, bring their parents into more awareness so they don't get forced in that situation and have all these difficult things happen to their family, the shame and all of that. So, I mean, I think as much as I'd like to do a lot of work here in the United States, I also want to do some work globally to help in other countries, where I can, because I think that just helps my son get closer to a more safe and accepting world.
Go ahead, Jaevion.
Yeah, no, I think there's no one set strategy to ensure that we accord the respect that people deserve and the dignity that they have. But I think we have to realize that most of the energies need to be invested in national efforts. It has to be supported by local communities. It can, I think there's too much attention on the international front, and then that then has negative effects on local people themselves, and which is why it's so important that the activities that are done by international allies and partners are driven and advised and led by local persons, because while it is good for example, for Americans or British citizens to protest about the Uganda Kill the Gays bill, for example, there has to be some sort of local strategy to ensure that at the end of the day, those who are in Uganda are safe, those who are in Uganda can end their school, that they do not have to go to school every day fearing that they will be bullied. And, for example, a couple years ago, there was an intention to boycott tourism in Jamaica because of LGBT issues. Likewise, to boycott Red Stripe Beer, which is one of our famous alcoholic beverages, which our organization didn't support because we just didn't think that it would have been a good strategy and would have been a good way to say to people here in Jamaica that we want you to respect LGBT people, because when you boycott tourism, boycott the countries, for example, then all it does is hurt the economy, hurt the pockets of people who are in our own families, for example, or even LGBT people who might depend on a number of these different elements within the economy of a country just to live day to day. So I think we have to ensure that it's supported by the national level strategies with international support as well, which has a very important place in the dynamics of human rights in general.
Yeah, and that's a very good point there too. I mean, it's incredibly complicated. If you want to hit the bottom line of a company, but then you think about what the economic effects are that can be positive within a country, that despite some of the cultural perspective or even the political institutions in power, that can already start to liberalize and westernize, just by bringing in Western products. It's a whole complicated mess, and so the point is that we can't oversimplify it and treat it like it's black and white.
Can I just say on that fact?
Yep.
Yeah, I just want to say, just as a simple thing, marriage brings money, and we've got all this sort of talk. I've been hearing it with HuffPost Live, in all the papers around Australia. We all have these budget deficits, and the long and the short of it is that marriage brings money. So why not legalize gay marriage from that standpoint? Because gay marriage brings money. It brings all this money back to your economy. So why not legalize it just from that point of view?
There you go. The economic argument always works, because unfortunately we can't just say, let everybody love whoever they want and live however they want. The world is not there yet, but hopefully one day. All right, we have to leave it there. But Jaevion, Kyle, Marsha, and Olga, thank you all so much for joining me today.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, guys, stick around. A lot more coming up on HuffPost Live.